What up?
Happy draft day eve.
Draft eve?
Yeah.
Yes, that is today.
Big celebration.
Yes. So this is always going to be a crazy week. This is me talking to the people listening. So we were going to post something this morning, but then we decided we wanted to wait until Mickey got to talk because rather than just spew the same draft nonsense we've been telling you for, a month now, because nothing has really changed, we decided to wait until Mickey talked and then do it this way instead, which is a live stream. Then it'll post in the morning, but at least this way more people get to see it. So yeah, we're just going to talk for a couple seconds, let people find us, and then we're going to go into reactions to what Mickey Loomis said today, heading into the draft, which he talked for about 40 minutes. He actually did have some interesting things to say. And then we're going to go through our final mock drafts, which great. I'm
sure
excited.
Everybody's on pins and needles waiting.
We've just done so many of them, and I'm glad Mickey talked today, so we at least have something new to discuss, because I feel like this time of year, it's like, how many of the same conversations can you have building up to a draft, but you have to have them anyway.
Yeah, Saints quote unquote news has been very thin, but I guess we should
be very quiet.
We should be lucky because we could be talking about Alvin Kamara, Demario Davis, and Marshawn Lattimore being suspended for placing bets in the facility, but thankfully that did not happen.
Right, it's been very quiet. Right, like if you could be the Packers and have been spending all season trying to figure out how to trade Aaron Rodgers. You could be the Jets and spend all offseason trying to figure out how to trade for Aaron Rodgers. You could be the Lions and suddenly having to be able to figure out how to make things work without four of your players that you thought you were going to have. There's a lot that could be going on that is not involving the Saints. So I'm happy about that personally, but it does kind of feel like this is like the quiet before the storm, and we're going to end up getting the most ridiculous draft day possible.
Yeah, because I mean, we all know it. I think fans know it, and even Mickey kind of chuckled and laughed about it, about having 8 draft picks, and it's like, for now.
Yeah. All right. So there won't be like a typical mailbag that we'll do on a lot of our live chats because we have too much to go through. But if you do have questions or comments, feel free to throw them in, and we will get to them as many as we can while things are going on. So if you have questions about our mock drafts, throw them in there and we'll try to pop them up. I did have a Saints shirt on. Marco really wants me to have a Saints shirt on. I did have a Saints shirt on for our last mock draft, but we didn't end up posting the video. So keep in mind, Marco, I am coming from the Saints facility. It's not exactly encouraged for the reporters to show up in Saints gear. So I have to say I could not don a Saints shirt today. I could probably go find one, but we've already started the live stream. And rather than leave you all standing here for 10 minutes while I rifle through my drawer, I'm going to have to live without one. But I do apologize. I'll get one. I'll get one pretty soon.
For tomorrow night when you're in the Saints draft war room, you better be decked out in black and gold.
Right. I think that's one thing that like people need to understand is you cover the team. And when you cover the team, you're not allowed to just, show up in, head to, a Cam Jordan jersey. It doesn't shine so well, but.
No, it's funny you mentioned that too. Like so many friends and family think like I've just got Saints autographs and memorabilia just dripping from my ceilings because I get so much of it on a daily basis. I have never gotten a player's autograph in the locker room and will never do that.
Oh, no.
That's just so unprofessional.
Yeah, they'll probably kick you out.
Exactly. And folks don't get that. They're like friends and family are like, why? Why can't you never got Drew's autograph? I'm like, no, I didn't.
No. Yeah.
I even told him,
I'll ask him questions and he'll answer them.
Right. And my kiddo, he came out to training camp with my wife. He went with my sister-in-law. That's when he went and got autographs. But yeah, I'm not asking guys in the locker room kind of thing. It's just a really weird vibe to me.
Oh yeah. No, you're not supposed to do that. Anyway, But yeah, so I'm coming straight from the facility. So anyway, I'm sorry, Marco. I did promise him I would wear a Saints shirt on the next live stream. Just the timing didn't work out. But I'll get you.
We'll have to remember that for the pre-draft big one.
Yeah.
The post-draft, I mean.
I was going to say, this is the pre-draft.
Yeah, right.
So, all right, let's get this going. And yeah, we're going to get into a lot of Mickey Loomis stuff in the first segment. So this is just going to be like a raw recording like we do a lot of the time. So, Steve, if you want to get us rolling here, I think that would be good.
All righty. Mark that off. Welcome inside to well, there we go. Start that back over again. Welcome inside Black and Golden. It is here. We are on the precipice of starting the NFL draft. And I know that everyone has to be excited about the actual day happening instead of all the talk leading up to it. Jeff, we got to hear from Mickey Loomis today, and he divulged all those secrets that we were hoping we would find out. And you and I have some last minute mock draft projections that we're going to put out before the real deal happens on Thursday.
Yeah, this first segment, we're going to get into a bunch of clips. I have some audio I'm going to play for you from Mickey Loomis today. Talked for about 40 minutes, which is a long time. You know, when you go to a lot of these press conferences, usually 20 minutes is maybe 25, and they'll cut you off. He just kept going and going and going. And we got some interesting information in terms of, you know, their philosophy on trading up, how they feel about some of the situations regarding their players. And so I'm going to play a good amount of that for you. But first, we do have to play this one bite from Mickey because he said the quiet part out loud about friend of the program, Bobby Hebert, who was not in attendance.
Wait a minute, I don't have Bobby in the corner talking over me? What is going on? Huh?
We can conference at home. He's still sleeping.
What is going on?
Yep. He was not there, but I'm sure he'll have something to say on Sports Talk today when he is relayed that clip. Steve, are you frozen? I think Steve is frozen. Cool. Hold on, I'm going to call him. Oh, you're back.
That was you calling. Yeah, I had 2 blank screens with swirling, and I heard you for a little bit, and then it was gone, and you couldn't hear me
frozen.
at all. Womp womp. But I'm back.
Great.
Yay.
This is why I can't take you anywhere.
And I can't even blame the kiddo in Call of Duty. He's not home.
No, it's your dial-up internet.
Yes. Thank you, Cox Cable.
Yeah. All right. But yeah, so what we learned a lot about today was partially involving when you're at 29, you can't be guaranteed who's going to be on the board at that point. And one thing that Mickey went into is it's actually Jeff Ireland who has a formula of basically how many players, how many first round grades they have to have on players to ensure you get one of them at your draft position. And however long Jeff's been with the team, I think it's been about 8 years. That formula has never failed. Like if they're drafting at 11 and they need X number of players, they're willing to take at that spot to make sure you get one. Every year that has been the case. And here's what Mickey had to say about that when we got into it today. Oh, shit. Where is it? There it is.
Picking toward the back end of the first round, how difficult is that just to come up with like maybe who you think might be
Yeah.
there?
I don't know that it's difficult. I mean, we have a group of players that we think have a good chance to be available. Hopefully we're right. Jeff's got a formula that has been, it's never failed us in terms of the number of guys we have to have in order to get one of our players. And that's been pretty accurate over the years. So we have those numbers of players, and we'd feel good about, I feel good about where the player we might get at 29 and 40, for example. After that, it's a little more of a little more random after that.
I'm sorry, the formula, without getting into the formula stuff, it's just like giving you like a
Yeah, like if you have, well, we'll pick 29. There's a percentage of players, a percentage of that we have to have X amount of players available, and we know we'll get one of those. We don't have to have 29. We have to have less than that. And he's got a formula that's never failed.
So you might have to have like 5 guys that you like
Yeah.
for this pick, or it might be 3 guys for another pick.
Well, it's like, let's just say we're picking 11. We'd have to have 9 guys, and we know we're going to get one of the 9 according to his formula.
Because you know somebody's going to take someone not.
Yeah, because somebody, just historically, it's never fit. It's math.
What's the ballpark number this year?
Yeah, I don't know that I want to say that. I might say it. Let me think about it for a little bit.
He didn't say it. But I do think it's interesting when you look at, the Saints, when they're going into this draft, they're going to have a certain number of players on their board. And if that number gets low, you could see them get a little more aggressive. But what Mickey said was basically, it's not always about the numbers game involved there. It's usually about the order of that list. So if there's someone on that list that starts creeping down, that's when you might start seeing the Saints get more aggressive and potentially trading up. And I know someone in the comments was asking, do you think the rumors of the Saints trading up are accurate?
I see that too, yeah.
And I mean, who knows? But at the same time, the Saints are always capable of trading up. So I don't think that's been determined right now. I don't think the Saints have decided one way or another that they're going to trade up or not trade up. Mickey said he hadn't even talked to GMs yet this week, really. Like, that's going to start happening tonight, tomorrow morning. I should say Wednesday night, Thursday morning, for anyone listening to this in the morning. And so, like, we can look at all the reports we want. We can have all of these kind of ideas and innuendo about a trade market. At the end of the day, it's going to be happening mid-draft if it happens. You're not going to see the Saints make a decision to trade up until they see who's on the board. Probably 15, 16, 17. That's when you'll start really making decisions if you're the Saints. Mickey said he doesn't think they have the ammunition to trade up high into the draft, which I think, is a pretty easy thing to spot. But they do very much have the ammunition to go up a few spots, maybe go up to 20, maybe go up to 18. And so I think that's where you have to kind of figure that out.
Yeah, sorry if I had the frozen again. I have actually a Cox truck in the neighborhood. No excuses, but the Saints, I know you were talking about trading up with this team, and it's something we've definitely see be a move that they do. If I'm sure you said it, if they have their target that in that range that we're talking about in that formula, all of a sudden drops down to that in a spot where, hey, we can make that move and give up this year's first and the 3rd round pick to go get him. They're gonna do it. I mean, the quote from Rose City saying, "Are the rumors true of the Saints trading up?" You can say yes to that every season, basically, because if there is that player on the board available to them, yes, we're going to see them make a move again tomorrow on Thursday night, and I fully expect that to happen. It's just their MO.
Y'all have 8 picks, which is more than you've had in recent years.
Right now we have 8 picks.
Right now, subject to change. What kind of latitude does that give you, not only in possibly trading, but also in not having to necessarily focus on a particular position? I mean, you have a lot more flexibility, don't you?
Yeah, I think, it does give us some flexibility. I always feel like if you have picks in the latter part of the draft, it gives you the opportunity to bump up. If you have, a lot of picks in the top half of the draft, then it allows you to move way up if you want to. I wouldn't say we have the ammunition to move way up. We don't. But I think we do have, if we decide to bump up a little bit, that opportunity, we'd have enough resources to do that.
Little bump up.
Yeah, and so Rose City asks here, how far, if so, do they trade up and what do you give up? I think what you're talking about there is a few picks, right? Like maybe you're trading up to 22, maybe you're trading up to 21, maybe you're trading up to 20. Either way, you're going up to get a guy. You are not trading up for the vague purposes of getting a better player. And I think that's kind of tried and true, right? When you ask Mickey about his philosophy for the draft, what he'll say is find someone you love and go get them. You ask, okay, why won't they never trade back? And Mickey kind of explained that in this quote here about his draft philosophy. And a lot of it is like, you want to be going to get your guy. You don't want to be settling for whoever's available. It's the way the Saints operate. And I think it is a little different from kind of the more contemporary method of drafting for some maybe younger GMs, some newer GMs. But when you have a GM that's been there for 20 years, when you have a coaching staff that's really been pretty stable, even if you've changed it in the last 2 years, it's still the same kind of structure. You're able to do that. You're able to be consistent. And this is what he said on his kind of philosophy on trading.
Well, I mean, you guys have heard me say this. I think when you have a conviction, if you love somebody and you go get them, that's the preferred policy, I guess, that I like. Find somebody you love and go get them. And if you think you can get them where you're at, then you stay where you're at. I just feel like the philosophy of trading back means that if you really believe in your board and you believe how it's going to fall, is that you're moving back to get a lesser player. That's just kind of the premise that we have. It's not to say that we wouldn't move back, but that's the philosophy here.
Yeah, I think he says it right there. It's like to him, trading back is saying we will accept a lesser player rather than the player we want. Whereas trading up means you're going to get the player you want. And like he can say that doesn't mean they're not going to trade back. If that's how you're viewing it, if that's your philosophy going in, it absolutely means you're not going to trade back, because by doing that, you would be accepting defeat and accepting that your board is not good, the players on your board aren't good, and you don't have any options. And it's just like, there's a reason the Saints haven't traded back, and it's right there.
Yeah. Plus to me, it's like this team has been pretty adamant about we're not in rebuilding mode. We're trying to restock here. And while those young assets might be great for future and down the line, we're more looking for those guys that can help us immediately.
Yeah. And, one question that people might ask is, are there any positions where the Saints might overvalue them and take a guy early based on, I think the Saints terminology would be musts versus wants versus needs. And here's what Mickey had to say on that subject.
You talked about musts before. Do you have a couple of musts out there from a positional standpoint?
I think there's some things that we'd like to have. I don't know that I would call any of them musts. I think we've done a pretty good job in this offseason of taking a lot of those musts and turning them into wants or needs in our vernacular.
So basically addressing running back and defensive tackle.
Yeah. So, right. So, like, they didn't make that many moves this offseason. So I think that's a pretty good line you can draw between, okay, which players they signed and which positions they really felt needed help. And obviously defensive tackle was one of them. And now they don't feel like that's a must going into the draft. So they're not going to tilt and take a defensive tackle just because he's there. Running back, yes, Jamal Williams. I'm sure that was a must going in, and they filled it. Then you also got a couple of safety cornerback options, nickel options in Lonnie Johnson and Jonathan Abram. Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
I mix up their last names. And so, like, this is a team that does kind of feel like they have the pieces, and now you are supplementing that. And that's where you want to be going into the draft. I think in a lot of instances when you see really bad picks being made, it's because you're reaching for a guy because you feel like you need to fill a need. And the Saints never want to do that, and they don't want to leave themselves in position to do that. So I think if you're Mickey Loomis and you go to that press conference, that's the line you always want to say is we don't have any musts. And the other question would be Alvin Kamara. It's the elephant in the room. What's going to happen? How many games is he going to miss? And Mickey was asked whether that's going to impact how this team operates in the draft. And he basically said no. But here's his exact.
No, because that's a short-term it's not going to influence, who we pick, because that's a short-term issue, and we don't know what that's going to be yet. So, yeah, am I concerned about it? Sure, certainly, because it's going to affect, our team if something happens there. But it's a temporary issue.
Yeah, it's funny to hear him say that, because we were all, I think, expecting a 6-game suspension to be handed down as a minimum. And to me, I don't know if that's really short term. I guess so in the grand scheme of things.
Well, it's short term in the sense that you're drafting a player for 4 years.
Yeah,
Right.
for true.
You're not going to make a decision on a guy this year because Alvin's going to miss 6 games. I think that's why they decided to address it in free agency, because that is also kind of a short-term solution for a short-term problem. Because I do think this team is committed to Alvin beyond the season. I don't think this is going to be Alvin's last season. That said, he's getting up towards the age of running backs would typically fall off. And whether or not you think that his availability is going to be a long-term problem, you do need to start adding youth at that position. So I do think it's interesting how you fall on that. And I have a running back in my mock draft. I know you have a running back in your mock draft. I know it's a very popular position to see the Saints address in that kind of forum. But I would be really surprised if, outside of Bijan maybe falling to them at 29, if you see them go running back before the 3rd or 4th round. I could also see them coming out of this draft with no running back and everyone being shocked, and then they bring in like 3 undrafted free agents, like they always do, and we move on.
Well, there's something. You mentioned Bijan. Is he that kind of talent that maybe if he drops down to 19, 20, that they start going, is that a piece to this offense that could help us put us over the top? I'm not sure there.
I think that's unlikely. Just in terms of positional value, it's already hard enough to justify a running back in the 1st round in that sense, and giving up more assets to go get a running back. And then you look at that, like if you want Bijan, sure, but what if you were really high on some other running backs who are now getting pushed further and further down the board by the fact that he's still available, right? If Bijan is there at at 19, it's a pretty good chance that, one of your top running backs is going to be there at 40. Just doing the numbers alone.
Right.
Or if you want to trade up in the 2nd round and go get him, you could do that. Or maybe trade into the back end of the 1st if you really feel like that. I just think there's a lot of holes in there's a lot of room to grow on the defensive side of the ball, that giving up assets to go get a running back and also in turn not addressing that in the 1st round, or maybe in the 3rd round if you have to give up that 3rd round pick to go up, that's a tough sell for me. But again, Bijan is very, very good.
Yeah, I totally get that. And plus this year's class is so deep. And I know a lot of folks definitely holding out hope that maybe in that 3rd round range, they can get a Tajay Spears to keep him in Louisiana. But I think because of the class this year and how much running back talent you have, I can understand why it's hard to justify to making that move up to get the running back, especially when, I can see a lot more pressing needs because you did address that in free agency at least. But still with the defense and keeping that a top tier unit should be a priority.
I also have a really tough time seeing Bijan get past the Eagles at 10.
I know there's been rumors too lately. The Falcons have been connected with him.
Yeah, that would be a very Falcons pick. It would be like the Saquon Barkley of their Giants arc, right? It would be very similar. Like the Giants picked Evan Engram to try to make it on Eli Manning's last legs. The Falcons did it with Kyle Pitts. Neither worked out. Both are good players. Neither worked out for their team. And then they doubled down and took Saquon Barkley. And then this would kind of be that. This would be the Falcons doing it with Kyle Pitts, and then doubling down with Bijan before they really have a quarterback that they feel confident in. I would love it because it would be the worst possible pick they could make when you have guys on the board that could actually impact winning for a long time, rather than a guy who's probably going to be out of his prime when they're ready to compete. Oh, kind of like Saquon, right? Like you see the Giants struggling to keep Saquon under contract now that they are finally competitive. They have finally gotten to the point where it makes sense to have Saquon Barkley, and he's like out of their price range, So It would be a terrible pick for them. I'm rooting for it anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, when you talk about too, that quarterback situation in Atlanta, you mentioned Ritter. I mean, who's not to say week 1 we're not seeing what's his name, Heineke playing for them? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds you of, not really, but it does kind of feel like when Ryan Fitzpatrick went down to Tampa, and you kind of got the feeling that Tampa was kind of half in, half out on Jameis, and they clearly were because they moved on just a couple years later. And then Fitzpatrick was good enough. He won a couple games. He beat the Saints in that week 1 game. He threw for a ton of yards. And then, they were like, oh, wait, he's not that good. What are we going to do now? And they ended up lucking into Tom Brady. But it was not a good situation for them to be in. It kind of feels like the Falcons are in a similar situation now. Maybe they do believe in Desmond Ritter. Maybe he's going to be good. I just don't think you're ready to build an offense around Desmond Ritter right now.
No,
until you have an idea. And I don't know if they're going to want to take a quarterback at 8. I don't know if there's going to be a quarterback to take at 8. At least not like from a value sense. Obviously, there will be quarterbacks still on the board, but you could get into a situation where C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson are all off the board. And what are you doing? So anyway, we're not here to talk about the Falcons draft, but I have a hard time seeing Bijan getting past 10. A couple other things that Mickey said that I think were interesting. I think he might have said this last year. I'd have to go back, but when the Saints are like thinking about past trades, they actually have a book. Mickey described it as an encyclopedia at this point, of all of the trades, all of the draft trades that have occurred over the past dozen years. And every year he goes through it and he says, okay, that was a win for this team. That was a loss for this team. More so in like, okay, did it work out? Did you maximize that value? Was it probably an overpay? And that kind of informs his decision-making going forward. We've already heard him say that he considers last year's trade, both of them, to have been successful for the Saints. Obviously, you'll have to see how Trevor Penning pans out, how the number 10 pick pans out for the Eagles this year. But like, I don't think that he's counting that as a loss for the Saints in any way, even though that ended up sending the number 10 pick to the Eagles.
No, and I think he mentioned too, obviously, grading trades or players, 3 years after the fact, even of happening. I would love to slide a little shot of whiskey down Mickey's way and ask him about that, the year they moved up to get Davenport, obviously, and get his take on what do you think overall? Did you guys win that deal?
Yeah, I would guess that he would say they did not. But then again, like you traded the 27 pick and the next year's pick ended up being bad, right?
Yeah.
So it sounds a lot worse in retrospect of saying, oh, you spent 2 firsts to go get Marcus, but no one ever looks back and says, okay, what did they do with those picks?
Right.
And I don't know if they could have been that much better. Honestly, the thing that stinks about the Marcus Davenport trade, I would have still made the trade. I think the trade was good. Going from 27 to 14, the value makes sense. You have to hit the pick, though. And what made that trade bad was the pick. If they had ended up with Jair Alexander and you got to pair Marshawn Lattimore and Jair Alexander for 4 years, 5 years, man, that would have been a steal of a trade.
Yeah, I got like goosebumps thinking about that, actually.
Right. And there was others, like Tremaine Edmonds. Picks 16 through 20 of that draft are all Pro Bowl players on their rookie deals. And the Saints ended up with, Marcus Davenport at 14. Anyway, I went through and graded those for the last mock draft. And like that's what really stands out to me is like, I'd probably make that trade again. I'm just not going up after Marcus. I'm going up after pretty much anybody else. Because there were so many Pro Bowlers. Anyway, there's one other note, and it's really just a kind of a draft philosophy thing that I just enjoy getting kind of this insight into their process because you don't get a lot of it. Like it's very like hidden. It's under lock and key. They want to keep it in house so that they don't get traded in front of, like they did with Pat Mahomes and Reuben Foster. And it's when you're looking at a player who's not a scheme fit, they call it like 9-0. And so they're going to grade everybody on a scale of what round they're going to be in, right? Are you a second round prospect? Are you a third round prospect? But there's inevitably going to be players that don't fit what the Saints do. And what they'll do is, so this guy's a 2 or a second rounder, and we'll call him a 2.90. And that means like, okay, maybe he is a linebacker or like an edge rusher prospect, but he's more of a 3-4 outside linebacker. The Saints run a 4-3. Doesn't really work. But he's still a really good quality player. You're not going to draft him in the second round, but if you have a second round grade on a guy who might be a scheme fit and you're staring at him in the 4th round, you might still take him and try to make him fit because he's that talented of a player. And I just thought it was interesting. Like, that's an interesting way to look at it, because when you're talking about like a big board of prospects, when you're talking about, okay, these are all my first round prospects. Well, when you're the Saints and you're doing that and you're saying this guy doesn't fit, maybe this is a zone corner and we're more of a press man corner team, corner defense, and you're giving them a 9-0, they basically come out of that list. So that's why you might only have, even if you have 32 first round grade prospects, you might only have 22 first round grade prospects that you actually would draft in the first round. And so that's why I thought, we're kind of coming full circle with that whole Jeff Ireland formula. It's like, how do you get to that point? What number do you have to be at, and what draft slot do you have to be at to guarantee you get one? And that's what changes the dynamic is, B.J. Ojolari, for example. I love B.J. Ojolari. I think he's a great player. He does not make sense for the Saints. But if he drops late second round, early third round, maybe he does make sense for the Saints. And you can say, hey, he's about 260 right now. We want him to be closer to about 280. Maybe we can make that work, right? Maybe he is someone that we can put in multiple roles. So I just thought that was an interesting insight into their process.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And the whole thing with, mentioning Jeff Ireland's formula, anytime afterwards, anytime he kept mentioning Jeff, though, I'm like, what is, Nowak feeding him over there?
Yeah, Jeff. Good old Jeff. Let's answer one question here. It's not really draft related, but I'd rather get into this segment than the next segment. Ooh. Pelicans Nola says Washington will not pick up Chase Young's 5th-year option, so it's time for the Saints to sign him immediately. It's not really how it works. He's in the 4th year of his contract. They're not picking up his 5th-year option, which will be next season. And so the Saints can't go sign him. They could technically trade for him. Someone else mentioned that, maybe the Saints could trade for him. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that this is the time of year you're bringing in a guy who, we're talking about injury issues with Marcus Davenport. Chase Young's right in that boat too.
For sure.
He was taken a year after Marcus Davenport, right? You picked up Marcus's 5th-year option. They did not pick up Chase's, but that doesn't mean they're going to let him go. It's worth noting that Mickey was also asked about Cesar Ruiz and whether they were going to pick up his 5th-year option. And he said that they have made a decision on whether they're going to do it or not. They are not ready to disclose it. So we don't know what that decision is, but it's not always about the money. I'm sorry, it's not always about whether you want that player to stay. Sometimes it's about money, right? Like a 5th-year option is not cheap for a rookie. It's an average of, I want to say the top 10 salaries at the position. It might be less than that, but either way, you're paying a premium to keep that player around. At the guard position, at the defensive end position, those salaries are high. So you're not really getting a discount. And in the case of Cesar Ruiz, it might be more fiscally sensible to just sign him to an extension. So I think that's what you're trying to figure out. But we'll find that out with Cesar in the next couple of days. And I would be very surprised if Washington is not trying to retain Chase Young, a guy they spent the number 2 overall pick on, past this season.
Definitely someone who is, you talk about a physical specimen there with Chase Young. Unfortunate deal with him for sure with the injuries. I don't know how much you would invest as a team considering his past. He's going to have to go through this season, though, obviously with Washington. And I guess we'll see what kind of year he has. If he has one closer to when he was healthy, he's going to get paid big bucks, obviously, at that position.
Yeah, I think it's a similar position to what the Saints were in with Marcus Davenport, and they decided to pick up his 5th-year option.
Yeah,
and then he was offered a contract that was probably more than they were willing to stomach. If you're Washington and you don't have quite as crowded of a cap table, you probably match that deal for Minnesota, right? Like it's worth it to you to keep him in, and hopefully you build that up. It wasn't worth it to the Saints, but at the same time, will he have a market like that? I don't know. I'm just like, I don't think that them not picking up his 5th-year option really has anything to do with whether they want to keep him or not. The Giants didn't pick up Daniel Jones' 5th-year option. It ended up costing them because they ended up paying him more than they would have on the 5th-year option.
If
But
anything, it just motivates Chase Young more for this season.
Exactly. All right. Let's see. Okay, I'll leave you with this, and it's a 9-second quote from Mickey Loomis, but I think it is very telling of, he was willing to talk about running back. He was willing to talk about, I think this position is good in this draft, and this position is, for what reason and why. He was asked about the defensive line group, and this was his answer.
Yeah, I think it's a good group. Yeah, I think it's a good group. I mean, I don't want to give away anything, so I'm not going to talk about the individuals, but I think this is a good group.
Very vague and blah, and yeah, I'm not going to give you anything. It's like me asking my kid how his day at school went. Yeah, it was good.
Well, I mean, no, it'd be like if you asked your kid if he's dating anybody. And he would be like, no, I don't want to tell you about that because then you'll have this information. You can use it against me. And that's, I think, what's happening there is Mickey.
Right, like the D-line's great. Yeah, but I don't want to talk about it.
Right. Because I think there's a reason, it's not a coincidence that everybody who's anybody is saying the Saints need defensive linemen. It's because they do. And it's also a draft where there is a lot of value at the defensive line spot. So yeah, I think I would be surprised. I think it would be an upset if the Saints don't come away with a defensive lineman in probably at 29, definitely in their first 2 picks. And I think that type of answer is like Mickey kind of giving you a nod and saying, yeah, I that's definitely true.
Yeah, I mean, depending on, who's going to be up there for them to make that move on is going to be interesting. I know there's been a lot of buzz about Kalijah Kancey leading up to this draft. I just don't know, obviously, how high he's going to be taken. A lot of knock on him has been an undersized defensive tackle, but man, that dude's been sure productive.
For sure. And let's wrap up this segment and come back, and we're going to get into Steve's mock draft. There have been a couple questions in the chat about, what would be the first position player we would take, some impact defensive tackle names, and that's where we can really get into it. So I'm going to hold off on those questions now, but we will get to them. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. Got mock draft city coming up. We just heard from Mickey Loomis. Stick around for that. All right, and we're back on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak, along with Steve Geller. We're little boxes on the side of the screen now because we want to get to Steve's mock draft. We're going to start with Steve's. Steve is not a Pro Football Focus subscriber, so the 7-round mock draft option that we kind of wanted to do, but I am a sucker, and I did pay for that. So.
And they won't even give me draft grades on my 3 picks.
They won't give you grades anymore, man.
Nope.
They really try to make money around draft time. I guess I can understand why.
Yeah, they're like, you don't pay for this and you have no blue check mark. You get nothing.
Right. Well, those are 2 different things.
I know.
But so we're gonna get into his. This is a 3-round mock, so it'll be a little more intensive. We can answer some of those questions, and then I have a full 7-round mock draft that I kind of hate, but we're gonna get into that in the final segment, and that'll be more kind of go through it all and keep it short and sweet. But for this first one, let's just go through the first 5 picks here. A couple interesting changes, right? So Bryce Young's still number 1, but then you have Will Levis at number 2 to the Texans. It's a pretty solid shakeup because it means that CJ Stroud falls to the Colts. And pretty much every mock draft I have seen from PFF over the last month, 2 months has had Anthony Richardson going to the Colts at 4. So that kind of does shake it up, right? And so if we were talking about the Falcons potentially ended up with Anthony Richardson or somebody, nope, Raiders snake him out.
Well, didn't someone too put a post on Reddit, something about the first pick overall being Levis, and it changed draft odds even?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's wild that random post on Reddit has made an impact the way it did. But
Right.
it did. And he jumped up to number, like, I think his odds were like plus 550, and previously they had been like plus 2,000. Bryce Young is still the favorite, but I think in this mock you are seeing the results of that.
Yes.
Is that he has moved down this listing. Peter Skoronski to the Falcons at 8. I think that's the sensible pick, right? Like, one thing that makes me laugh every year about the Falcons is they continue to make picks as if they're like a contender, and they have not been a contender for several years now. But they keep taking like skill positions. They keep taking the Kyle Pittses and the Drake London. No, who did they take last year? Was it Drake London?
The
wide receiver?
Ritter.
Well, they took Ritter in the 3rd round, but I'm talking about the wide receiver they took in the 1st round. It was Drake London.
Yes.
They took Drake London, right? Like, where are the picks that are like, man, we have to build up an offensive line to protect our quarterback? It's like, what are you doing? Like, that's like the Giants at least learned their lesson, and they started taking offensive tackles every year.
Yeah.
They ended up with Andrew Thomas and the kid out of Alabama this last year. I can't remember his name. The Falcons have not done that. So in this mock draft, they are at least being more sensible and taking Peter Skoronski, Zach Street's favorite because he went to Northwestern.
He's not going to be happy he went to Atlanta, though.
Yeah, but at least he went before Paris Johnson there.
Right.
Then you have Quentin Johnston going to the Bears at number 9. First wide receiver off the board. Jackson Smith and Jigba going to the Eagles. That's another popular pick. For whatever reason, everyone wants the Eagles to have this crazy trio of wide receivers, and that would give them A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, which is pretty good.
They're trying to, I guess, make them the new greatest show on grass, because I don't think it's turf over there in Philly.
Right. I think it technically is grass.
Yeah.
Here, the defensive tackles start coming off the board. Kalijah Kancey to the Titans at 11. Tight end Dalton Kincaid to the Jets at 13, given Aaron Rodgers his new best friend. Lucas Van Ness to the Patriots at 14. He's a popular target, I think, if the Saints do move up.
Yeah.
He's a good example of, Mickey said, it's not always about the number of players that they might want to pick. It's usually if they have someone graded really highly that might fall. And so, for example, Lucas goes off the board at 14 here. If he gets to 18 and the Saints get on the phone with the Lions and say, hey, what does it take to go up to 18? And they like the deal they're offered, he could be a guy they move up and get just because he fits, like, from a measurables perspective, from a productivity perspective. So I think that's something to watch out for. And I think when you're talking about the Saints trading up and everyone's very interested in, what might it look like? What might it take? I think that's more so than like just the numbers involved. It's the players available. If someone who makes a ton of sense for the Saints is still on the board in the late teens, that's where I think you're starting to burn up the phone lines, because as Mickey said, the noise doesn't really start for them until about 3 picks before they're on the clock.
Yeah.
And so in this case, if Lucas is there at 15 and they view 18 and they've established it as a tradable pick, this might be where they really start to heat up those conversations. So it's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too. You mentioned obviously, a body type even for defensive tackle, defensive end that they look at. I'm curious to know how much that's going to change to their perception with, a guy like Ryan Nielsen not there anymore. But I would imagine that basic, that big 6'4", 6'5" frame is something they're still interested in.
I don't think it's going to change all that significantly. I don't think that's how they scout. I think they have kind of a pedigree that they look for, and Dennis Allen is still that guy. Like, Dennis Allen is not going to change his offensive or his defensive philosophy based on the hires he brought in. If anything, he brought in guys who kind of match his defensive philosophy. So you're not competing. If they changed head coaches entirely and they came with a whole new regime, then I think you start to really adjust, because you might switch to a 3-4. You might, change how you're covering on the back end, in which case you would have to kind of reset your roster a little bit. But yeah, I don't think that like Joe Woods is going to come in and be like, no, we want smaller defensive ends now.
Yeah, get a little shorter. That'd be better.
Yeah. So, okay, we're on to the second half of the first round. Paris Johnson drops all the way to 20. That's interesting. Brian Brzee, who just is like programmed to go off the board 3 picks before the Saints, goes at 22 to the Ravens. Is another example of a guy, if they really do love him, and I think that they probably should be high on him. If he's on the board at 20, it might be where you start burning up the phone lines to the Seahawks. Then if they're not amenable, go talk to the Chargers, right? So that's something to keep in mind.
Feel like, yeah, there's a run right here with Brees, Flowers, Murphy, McDonald. A lot of those names have been, I've seen, mentioned to the Saints.
Yeah, Miles Murphy. I did a roundup, a mock draft roundup today. I haven't posted it yet because I ran out of time. He was the most popular mock draft selection to the Saints. I think I wrote it down here.
Okay.
I think I ended up with about 20 or 30 mock drafts that I was looking at. He was mocked 7 times to the Saints. The next highest was Brian Brzee with 4. Then you had 4 players who were the pick in 3 different mock drafts. That's defensive tackle Keon White, defensive end Adetomiwa Adebawore. I'm working on it. If he gets drafted by the Saints, I'll get better at it.
I have to work on it, right?
Then Kalijah Cansey, and then Mozzie Smith. And you can, pretty much do the math there. That means that 7, 11, 14, 17, 20, 23 of these mock drafts had the Saints taking a defensive tackle, defensive end. Actually, so 24, 25. Yeah, 25 out of 30 mock drafts had them taking a defensive tackle or defensive end. So, yeah, common pick. Anyway, what did you do is the real question. And so we're going to get to that now with the 29th overall pick. And the Bengals did you a favor by taking Bijan Robinson right before, and you don't have to explain that one again.
Absolutely, you know it.
Announce your pick, Steve.
Yeah, number 29, I ended up going back to my first mock draft, ended up with the same guy, Mozzie Smith. Not going to give you that great pass rusher on the D-line, but certainly someone that is a space eater and going to help stop the run. And we saw that run stuffing ability be a big issue this past year. So I would love to add a guy like Mozzie's big frame to that D-line.
Yeah, and I think he's another popular pick, right? It's just, yeah, if you can get your hands on a premium defensive tackle, it feels like a no-brainer. But, I think we've learned not to ever say the Saints are a no-brainer. All right, let's move on to the second round. It's round 3. You got a little creative with how you presented this.
I was trying to do it the best I could. Yeah, it was fun to do on my phone. I was like, man, Jeff had his all nice and organized.
Always.
At least I just didn't give you a list of names this time.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So this is the second round. Broderick Jones, Felix Anadike Uzama, Daewon Jones, Osiris Torrance goes all the way to 35. He would be a nice guy if you could pick him up at 40. Like my dream Saints draft, I think, is defensive tackle, whoever it is, at 29. Save your assets. Don't move up. Just get the guy that you want if he's available. Hopefully he is. And then turn around and just cross your fingers that Osiris drops to 40. Because he's close right here. You got the 35. And if he gets into the mid-30s, that's probably where you really start thinking about it trading up again. Like you're talking about, okay, what will it cost to go up from 40 to 34, right? It won't be that much. You might maybe swap 3rd round picks, give him a future 6th, and you're right there. So I think that's something to talk about, but that's not who you picked. Cam Smith, who I believe you picked in a previous mock, goes off at 36.
Right.
BJ Ojolari goes off at 38. Adetomiwa Adebawore goes off at 39. I'm getting better at it.
Yeah, you are.
And you went with
another guard. Couldn't get Osiris, so ended up with Steve Avila. Just looking to, solidify more of that depth on the interior of the O-line because Lord knows we need it.
For sure. And yeah, I don't, Steve is not a guy I watched a ton of. That's what makes it difficult. Like I didn't see a lot of TCU games, so I don't have as good of a feel for it. But He's been a popular pick to the Saints at 40, and I think he is more of a reasonable availability guy to be looking at there, because I would be very surprised if Osiris gets like I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he gets out of the first round. I would be surprised if he is not one of the top 5 picks on day 2 if he does.
Yeah, it's obviously, it's just so hard to predict, obviously where guys are going to go and thing, but you get kind of a a basic sense of who will be in that range. And yeah, I feel like Avila could be around for them in that spot for sure. And like I said, just any kind of depth along that O-line would sure be welcome.
Yeah, I'm just kind of going through the second round picks here. Not a ton surprising. Drew Sanders drops pretty far. He drops to 58. I've seen some people like putting him at 29 for the Saints, so that would be a drop for him. Andre Carter to 57. Luke Musgrave here at 49.
Yeah, I will say Laporta was tempting for me with that pick too. I was kind of thinking tight end.
Yeah, he goes at 48. He goes one pick before Luke Musgrave in this mock.
And Siaka Ika's one that I remember doing mocks, and he was popping up a lot in that first round in that 28, 29 range, and it seemed to fall down in mocks.
He's been down. I think he's kind of fallen off a little bit. The one that really surprised me, if I had to pick one pick here that surprises me the most, it would be Jahmyr Gibbs at 63. I do not see a scenario where he ends up at 63. But who knows?
Yeah, it seems pretty far down, obviously.
Yeah. All right. And on to the third round.
That devaluation of running backs. Don't tell Deuce that, though. You don't like that.
No, but it's definitely true. You get into draft day, and suddenly the running backs just don't seem as exciting because they just don't go, right? Oh wait, hold on, that's the wrong one.
It's a great little teaser for the third round here.
Yeah. And so the Saints draft at 71. Darnell Washington goes all the way to 70.
Yeah, that
would have been a very tempting pick. Again,
right.
It's like, if he's there, do you trade up, thinking it's not like he might go ahead of you? You did not. You stuck there, and you ended up with who?
I went with the A-Chain, Devin A-Chain. Get some more juice for the backfield, and with that suspension of Kamara for 6 or however many games it is, I feel like he's a similar type player that could provide you with, that running ability, that quickness in space, and also being a reliable receiver, hopefully out the backfield. I think that running back spot still does need to be addressed, even though they got a guy like Jamal Williams. There's just not really much depth, if anything, right now on this roster. I think besides Kamara and Jamal, we have just Benjamin, right? I don't know if there's anybody else signed at this point.
Yeah. I think, those are the only players you feel like are options, right?
Right. Who knows what's going on with Washington? I know he didn't play the rest of the season due to migraines, but we haven't heard him being re-signed. I don't know if Mark Ingram gets brought back on a really friendly team-friendly deal, veteran option, but he's still not going to be someone you lean on a lot. We've seen that now.
It wouldn't stun me if he was one of the practice squad guys, kind of like Chris Harris was last year. You see a lot more veterans ending up in those roles because they know that they can be brought up at any point. And we'll see. We'll see what happens there. The question here would be interesting is that you have Devon A-Chain and Zach Charbonnet both on the board at 75 or at 71, I should say. And I am curious. I don't know who they would be higher on. I almost think Charbonnet would make more sense, just in the sense of, like, he's a kind of a downhill guy, a one-cut guy.
Yeah, I was going to say he's more of your bigger back option, obviously.
Exactly. Again, I think that's what you want as kind of the change-up. Kind of like the A.J. Dillon to Aaron Jones out in Green Bay. Like, I think that's kind of the, that's kind of like the Jamal Williams to Alvin Kamara, right? Like, Jamal Williams is more of a downhill, hard-hitting back, and Kamara is more of the scat back. But
that's why I wanted A-Chain with Williams, because Kamara is going to be out.
Yeah, and then so Dorian Williams goes here, kid out of Tulane. Corey Trice, another one who the Saints had looked at. Dwayne McBride, another running back. So the Eagles, they're just loading up at running back. Oh, no, they didn't take a running back at 10 in this mock. And then Kendry Miller is the guy the Saints brought in. I think if you don't go running back at 71, I think he's the guy you're hoping to bring in the fourth round.
And then another surprise, I guess you would say, from this mock is the fact that no Tajay Spears taken.
Nope. So you could have got him maybe in the 4th round. Although they do pick a little later in the 4th round. You get all the way to 115, and that might be tough. But all right.
Overall in this mock, I was definitely, I would say, my happiest of what the outcome was. And I just thought it was funny. I ended up with Mozzie Smith, who was initially, in the first mock, ended up being my guy. So it just came kind of full circle and seems right.
Yeah, I think the Saints would be happy if this is a very much okay. We need these positions, and we went and got them kind of draft.
Right.
Right. And while teams will often say like we're going best player available, at the end of the day, needing a player in a certain position or wanting a player at a certain position, as the Saints would put it, is a big thing. It does factor in. The second the Saints went and drafted Derek Carr, the first round quarterback went out the window, right? And it's not because there aren't first round quarterbacks they might be interested in. It's because it just doesn't make sense. At least that's how I see it.
I agree with you totally. You just went out and got this guy, especially hearing how much he talked about not feeling wanted in Las Vegas. Well, if you're just going to sign a new deal in New Orleans and all of a sudden they're taking a quarterback in the first round, you're already looking over your shoulder. It's like, wait a minute.
I agree. But all right, let's wrap this segment up. We're going to come back. We're going to go through a 7-round mock draft.
7 rounds of fun.
A lot less about each player, but a lot more players. So stick around for that. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow Steve on Twitter at Steve Geller WWL, and check out latest content at WWL.com. Stick around. All right, we're back for one more segment on Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller. You are the listener. We appreciate you. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. Leave a rating, leave a review. Really do appreciate it. We're going to be getting into real draft country tomorrow. I'm very excited to not have to do mock drafts anymore. Another programming note is I was able to talk to Cam Jordan this morning. And we'll have that interview in a later podcast. I didn't want to cram it into this one and then not give it the justice that it deserved. It's not really about the draft, so it won't be old. We're going to try to get to that early next week. One thing that we talked about was, and he's told this story before, on draft morning for draft day for him. So he was in a draft with multiple Cams and also a player named Jordan Cameron.
That was great.
And it's just so funny when you think about like how this happened. Is the Browns were going to draft Jordan Cameron, and they called Cameron Jordan and were like, "Hey, we're going to draft you." And he's like, "No, you're not, because I just got drafted." And like, oh shit! And it is funny because if you watch The League, which is a great show, if you haven't watched it, I envy you because you're going to be able to get to watch it for the first time. There's an episode, I think it's either the first or second season, where Cam Jordan and Jordan Cameron are both in it, and it's like I forget. Nick Kroll is he's like, we'll give you, like, he'll win a bet if he can pick who is who. It's like, which one of these is Cam Jordan and which one of these is Jordan Cameron, and he couldn't do it. It was very funny, but we talked about that. We talked about a lot of stuff.
It's great too because I mean, obviously they're immensely different looking gentlemen.
Well, right. One's a tight end, but he did talk about how, like, in retrospect, it does make a lot of sense because if you look at everything the Browns have done since that call, they haven't gotten much better about how the organization has handled things. I think if you had to pick an organization that Cam is ready to troll more than the Falcons, it's the Browns. But all right.
That makes sense. I'm like, you're saying, hey, we're going to draft you. And it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah. I wish he had recorded that phone call. It's been so funny. All All right. So we're going to get into this. This is a 7-round mock draft. Yeah, I think there's been some noise about Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis. I think this is how it's going to end up going. Like there's been some scuttle that the Texans might end up going Will Anderson at number 2. I think that would blow my mind. Like you don't get to draft number 2 overall very often. And when you are there, I think you have a responsibility to at least try to bring in the quarterback, right? Like not doing that would be a disservice to your fans. And so I think this is how it's going to go. And if it's not CJ Stroud, it'll be a different quarterback. I don't see how you can draft at number 2 in a draft this heavy for the quarterbacks, not having a quarterback and come away with anyone that's not a quarterback.
Hey, it might be them just trying to drum up interest or whatever because,
That's
folks
right.
might be thinking, oh, DeMeco Ryans, new head coach, defensive mindset. He's going to want to go, with a DN kind of thing. But yeah, you have nothing right now over there quarterback wise.
Right. How badly do the Cardinals want whoever they want? Because if I'm the Texans, I'm trying to make them think that I want whatever player they want. Because I want to try to get assets from the Cardinals or maybe the Colts. Anyway.
You're definitely not going to get a free meal from them, though. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah. So Will Levis goes to the Raiders at number 7 here. Tyree Wilson to the Falcons. Peter Skoronski to the Eagles. Paris Johnson to the Texans. Jackson Smith and Jigba to the Texans. And this is another example of the Texans drafting CJ Stroud and Jackson Smith and Jigba and trying to do the Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase thing.
I like that.
I don't know why I did this. I'm not sure what that means. But I think it is an interesting strategy. Jets bring in Bijan Robinson. So Aaron Rodgers gets his running back. Lucas Van Ness to the Washington Commanders. Miles Murphy goes to the Bucks. Kalijah Kancey to the Seahawks. That's kind of a rough couple picks right there.
Yeah.
But we're going down. Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers. You got kind of a run on wide receivers here, which helps the Saints. I think you want to see this happening. You want to see cornerback, wide receiver, safety. If you're the Saints, another wide receiver at 25, tight end at 26. This would be kind of a dream scenario if you are trying to bring in a premium defensive tackle because there are several still on the board. Dalton Kincaid, he's another guy who I think if he gets to 29, you're really looking closely at me like, is tight end that valuable? He goes off the board here. And so I end up being able to bring in Brian Brzee, who is a guy who I wanted to take in these mocks previously, but he was just never available. And I think that's why I like doing it this way is if I had my pick from day one, it would have been Brian Brzee. But every time I did a mock, he would end up going at 12, at 15, at 21. In this instance, he was available, so I was able to get him. And I like it. He's an injury-prone guy, and that concerns me considering the struggles you have had to stay healthy. But the talent there, I think, is just too much to look past. And at a position of need, it makes too much sense.
And the last name is close to being a future Hall of Famer. So
it's got all the right letters.
Yes.
You can see Osiris Torrance ends up going to the Eagles at number 30. So that's the pick I was split between. And I think, there's a reason that he went number 30. Either way, this is the pick I wanted, and this is one I got. So we're going to keep going. Will McDonald, a guy who I don't think fits the Saints, goes to the Chiefs at 31. Mozzie Smith goes to the Texans at 33. Dawan Jones goes to the Cardinals at 34. So, those are two guys who I would have considered at 29 and maybe been like, oh, maybe they dropped to 40, right? If I went with Osiris Torrance, I was probably hoping that I could possibly bring in Mozzie at 40. He wouldn't have gotten there in this mock. So keep going. We get to number 40. And this is the point where I'm like, man, I don't like how this board is developing. I'm not really in love with it. I probably would have traded, but I didn't want to do any trades in this mock. So I end up tilting and taking Jahmyr Gibbs, someone who I have not even considered in any other mock, but he got to me at 40. I didn't like anyone else on the board. Jalen Hyatt would have been interesting, but he went to the Panthers the pick before me. Cam Smith is a guy who I would have been interested in, but he went to the Raiders a pick before me. I wanted someone exciting, so I went with Jahmyr Gibbs. And I don't hate it, right? Like, I think you are getting a really good value on a plug-and-play running back at number 40. Alabama has had a pretty good tradition of putting out running backs into the NFL outside of Trent Richardson. You finally moved on from Mark Ingram and you bring in another Alabama guy. It's kismet, right?
And I think we've, like you said, the running back position with Alabama, maybe one former Tide back leaving and Mark Ingram and bringing in the new fresh blood.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, moving on. Third round. We're going to go. Darnell Washington gets all the way to 45. Tamiwa Adebawore, 46. Steve Avila, your guy, goes to the Commanders at 47.
Man, you're going
Josh
to be
Downs,
a pro at saying Adebawore by the time he ends up on the Panthers or something.
Yeah. Cody Mach, who just looks like a football player, goes to the Steelers at 49. Luke Musgrave, 50. BJ Ojolari, 51.
Wow, big fall for Ojolari there.
Yeah, it's still second round. I think anywhere in the second round is reasonable for BJ because, like I said, he's not a scheme fit for everybody. He is very much a 3-4 outside linebacker. So if the teams that he would make sense on just go a different direction, I could see this happening. But I would be surprised to see him get out of the second round. Isaiah Foskey, my guy for the last 2 drafts, who I still really like, is on the Jags at 56. If he had gotten to 71, I would have taken him. Keep going. Sam Laporta at 60. Tuli Tuipulotu. It's a fun name to say. Cedric Tillman. He's a guy who I think is a low-key interest to the Saints at wide receiver. Goes off at 65. Zach Charbonnet goes off at 67. So I am now glad that I didn't wait on running back because if I wanted one of Jahmyr Gibbs or Zach Charbonnet, they're both gone. Devon Achane as well. And then we get to 71, and a familiar name, Nathaniel Dell, Tank Dell, still mine. I want him. He's coming in. That's my pick at 71.
Getting that wide receiver, you look at it, the depth on this team still needs to be addressed. Obviously, a wide receiver too, you're going to need more weapons, so I don't have any problem adding more artillery for Derek Carr for sure.
No. And, he's a guy I picked in each of the last 2 mocks. Nothing has changed for me. I still love him. I still think he's going to be an excellent player. So I am bringing him in. Hold on. All right. Going on to the 4th round. I'm not going to go through a lot of these names. I'm just going to scroll through. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see it. Otherwise, I'm just going to call out names as I go through them. Rashee Rice to the Lions at 81. That's an interesting one. Demarion Overshone, linebacker, who I think probably the Saints might have some interest in this range, goes to the Chargers. Kid out of Texas at number 85. Jordan Battle, safety out of Alabama, goes to the Giants at 89. I think this is the range you might consider a safety for the Saints. Jaden Reed, who I think really impressed at the Senior Bowl, goes to the Eagles at 94. It's a good pick for them. Tajay Spears, 96 to the Cardinals.
Roshan Johnson, too, another back I like, a guy that, doesn't get talked about as the backup to Bijan, man.
Right. Kind of reminds me of the Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown. Was it Oklahoma? No. Auburn.
Auburn, yeah.
Yeah. And Brandon Jacobs was the 3rd string running back on that team. Ended up transferring to Southern Illinois. And I would argue had the best career out of all 3 of them. They were all solid in the NFL, but Brandon Jacobs won a Super Bowl.
Right. There you go.
Byron Young, he's an interesting guy. I think if you're Todd Grantham and you talked about like, how do these new assistants kind of factor in? If Todd Grantham has sway in this process, I think Byron Young is the guy that you might see the Saints look at who they might not have looked at in previous seasons. Because he's a guy who worked directly with at Alabama. He's right in that kind of middle range. So if he gets to them at 115, I think that he could be the pick. He doesn't here. So I didn't get to take him, but I probably would have if he had gotten there just because of that. Corey Trice goes to Purdue at 102. We're getting there. Kendry Miller goes off the board at 105. So again, it's an example of I'm okay with the Jahmyr Gibbs pick in the 2nd round because I probably would have really wanted Kendry at 115 and maybe you trade up, but either way, he's off at 105. Luke Schoonmaker, which I've been saying Luke Skywalker, goes to the Jets at 112. He's an interesting guy that I think the Saints might be looking at. And then I get my guard here, Andrew Voorhees out of USC. This is more of a need pick than I love it pick. I think that this is where if you don't get if you need to build your interior offensive line in some way. You did not bring anyone in free agency, and so if you if you get to your 4th pick without taking a guard, I think this is where you really have to consider either trading up and getting a guy or landing a guy you like at 115. That's what I did here with Andrew Voorhees.
No, it's so important just because of the amount of injuries. We've seen it happen constantly with this team. It's rough in those trenches, man.
I agree. Speaking of the trenches, there's 2 LSU kids going back to back. Anthony
Waylon.
Bradford, Jaquilin Roy. We're going down. And then Kayshon Boutte at 124. So PFF is on my side saying that Kayshon Boutte is a 4th round pick at best. Dorian Williams goes at 125.
That was a big local flavor run there.
Yes, it was. We're into the 5th round. Saints have 2 picks in the 5th round, no picks in the 6th round, 2 picks in the 7th round. I think this is where, if you are the Saints and you're in the 5th round and there is someone at the back end of the 4th round and you're like, can we package both 5ths and both 7ths and go get somebody in the 4th round? That might be me projecting because I don't want to have to wait until the end of the 7th round for that final pick that's going to get cut. But I think this is where you might make that Adam Troutman move, right? Where you traded the back half of your draft in 2020 to go get him in the 3rd. Because like, how many rookies do you really have space for?
No, that's a big problem with the Saints and why they've done it in the past. Curious, do you know offhand, real quick? I was going to Google it, but I got Jeff here. So why was Houston's 5th rounder forfeited?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, I was just curious if you knew offhand.
No, but I mean, like, so yeah, if you could possibly go get the 120 from the Steelers, right? And you look at some of the players that are available. If you hadn't taken Jahmyr Gibbs in the 2nd round, and suddenly you're looking at a running back in the middle of the 4th round, and you really want Dwayne McBride, right? And you can go trade up to 120 and let the Steelers make those kind of project picks. Make a team that's rebuilding make those project picks. I think I would not fault it. I didn't do it in this mock because I just wanted to kind of go through the process. But let's go into round 5. Eli Ricks drops all the way.
Just so you know, Houston forfeited that 5th rounder due to league salary cap violations that were involving Deshaun Watson.
Okay, interesting.
A lot of bad juju around him.
But it's the Saints that are running the Ponzi scheme.
Yeah, good one.
The Browns get Chris Smith at 142. He's a player that I probably would have taken if he was available at whatever the Saints pick is. I always forget, 146. But yeah, this is a guy I really liked when I saw him at the Senior Bowl. I would comp him to Nick Vannett, which I know is not particularly exciting to anybody, but I think that's the type of player the Saints could use right now at tight end. They had Nick Vannett this time last year. Like, there's a reason they had him on the roster. And so I go with Davis Allen out of Clemson. Just a guy who I think profiles as a really good blocking tight end, a position that you're going to need because I don't think Adam Troutman's going to get another contract.
No, he sure got a lot to prove this season to earn that contract for sure.
Yep. Jake Haener goes to Washington at 150. I know that's a pick that's been popular with the Saints. Chase Brown, another impressive running back, goes to the Packers at 149. Keep going down. Mekhi Garner, which that's impressive for Mekhi Garner if he's a 5th round pick, because I wouldn't have guessed that. Kid out of LSU. Juice Scruggs, top 10 draft name in my opinion.
Juice. Not
for skill, just because I appreciate the name. And this is a pick that I also feel really good about. At 165, I'm bringing in Olusegun Oluwatimi. I think he has a nickname. I don't know what it is, but rest assured.
I was going to say Mike Haas and Deuce McAllister love you already.
I think it's Ali. I think it's like you would go with Ali Oluwatimi or something like that. But This is a pick that I think makes a lot of sense. He was at the Senior Bowl, and you're the Saints, and you're looking at the interior offensive line, and you're saying, we like the idea of a project with Cesar Ruiz, another kid out of Michigan, same coaching staff at Michigan. He's a guy who you probably could cross-train and have a backup center, backup interior lineman. I think it's a good pick. I think this is where I would want to take him, and it would help to shore up that interior line that you didn't exactly blow anyone away with your Andrew Voorhees pick in the 4th round, right? So this kind of gives you a little bit more of an investment and a guy who can play center, because I think if you're the Saints and you really feel good about Cesar Ruiz's improvement at guard, you are tired of having to shift him over to center every time Eric McCoy strains his calf. I don't know if that's going to keep happening, but it's happened each of the past 2 seasons. And I think that has significantly impacted Caesar's ability to kind of find his way at guard. I think you are tired of seeing that happen. And so last year you had Josh Andrews filling in, right? You would much rather have a guy who you are developing, not Josh Andrews, be that backup center. So this is why I'm going with this pick. I like it. I think he could also potentially be that jumbo lineman to get some extra juice out of it. It's what you did with Will Clapp. Will Clapp was the center and also the jumbo lineman. So I like this pick a lot. Even if it's not Oluwatimi that you go with, I like the concept of it. So that's who I went with there.
Yeah, I wasn't going to pretend to know much about Oluwatimi, so did a quick search and love the fact he didn't let up any sacks last year.
Yeah, he's a guy who was at the Senior Bowl, and I got a decent look at him, and that's why I like this going to the Senior Bowl, because I wouldn't have known about him either. But you kind of watch these drills
Right.
and you see, okay, that kid looks good. He's really kind of stoning people as he moves across the offensive line, and and I saw, Michigan center money. Anyway,
In the
keep
bag.
going down. Cameron Latu, tight end out of 49ers, out of Alabama, going to the 49ers. I think if you get this late in the draft and you haven't taken a tight end, he's a guy you might look at, another Senior Bowl guy. Going into the 6th round, we don't have any picks in the 6th round, so I'll just roll through it. Payne Durham, another tight end. There's so many tight ends in this draft. Like, it's insane how many quality tight ends there are. And even a guy like that, I think that he's serious upside in the 6th round. Going to the Bucks. I'm sorry. Yeah, going to the Bucks.
LSU.
Ali Gay going to the Patriots at 184. Andre Iosivas is a popular name. Now, this is one of the more bizarre names. I don't even know how to say it. Habakkuk Baldonado is my go-to there.
And who
Get out
knows,
of
like
Pitt.
the H could be silent for all we know.
Yeah, it's so a lot of letters. But I saw him mocked to the Saints in the 7th round of another draft, and I was like,
Okay.
man, fanned up with Adebawore, Oluwatimi, and Baldonado. That would be quite a
That'd be
combination.
great, yeah.
All right, Jaron Hall, quarterback, goes to the Lions. He's interesting. Jay Ward, another LSU kid. Oh no, we lost the bottom of my draft. What happened? Oh, it's over here. All right, Dorian Thompson-Robinson is. I would be stunned if he falls this far. I think Dorian Thompson-Robinson is a top 3 round pick. I think he's being undervalued. Raheem Jarrett, interesting. Maryland wide receiver, goes to the Chargers, and we're getting close to Saints land here. We are into the 7th round.
A little off topic there. Like we didn't see obviously that LSU run that we typically see in the first day of the draft, but man, there's been a lot of guys obviously throughout this draft that are going to hear their names in the rounds, not the first round, obviously.
Yeah, they didn't have that kind of premium guy, right? There's no Derek Stingley this year, but they have some quality players. Next year will be, well, actually, maybe not next year, but next year they'll have Jaden Daniels. It'll be interesting to see how he does. And then the year after that will be Harold Perkins. He might be the number 1 pick in the draft. It'll depend on what the quarterback class looks like. But yeah, that LSU team is going to be putting a lot of players into the NFL over the next several years, with Brian Kelly kind of getting his machine going. All right. Into the 7th round, Clayton Tune, kid out of Houston. That's a guy who I would have looked at. I ended up going with Tyrus Wheat as an edge rusher here. This is the first edge rusher I've come up with in this draft, and that's kind of surprising to me. It's part of the reason I don't like this draft, because I find it very unlikely you get to the 7th round and haven't picked an edge rusher yet. But he's a guy who makes some sense. I think even if you do pick an edge rusher earlier in the draft, you probably do try to bring in a guy in the latter portion here. But I went with Tyrus Wheat.
Yeah, SEC, got that big game recognition. That 10.5 tackles for loss, I think, last year, 6 sacks. Just the guy that you mentioned too. Like, I don't know how long you wait on edge, and this could be like another edition kind of thing. But who knows if they keep all these picks to this point? We know they love to pack stuff and move up, kind of deal.
I would be stunned if they end up making all these picks.
Right,
but
exactly.
In this sense, I'm just going through them. And then, so DJ Dale, it's probably the guy I should have taken, because, again, this is another Todd Grantham guy. If you can get him in the 7th round, it would be very surprising to me if the Saints passed on DJ Dale. Just knowing that, like, if the coach liked him, why wouldn't you bring him in here at a position that you're probably going to cut this guy anyway? So at least it would be that. So that's probably, if I had this to do again, I probably would have gone with Dale. Either way, moving on. Also at the Senior Bowl.
I was going to say, how many Senior Bowls does that make it for this, the 7th round mock?
It's a good question. I have to go back and look. And then Tyson Bagent, another Senior Bowl quarterback. I think it's probably likely that they end up grabbing a quarterback here if they draft in the 7th round. Just as a practice squad guy, you had nothing else who you can maybe try to develop and maybe strike gold on, right? Like Brock Purdy was the final pick in the draft. It's not unheard of for a quarterback to be picked in the 7th round and develop. It's very, very, very unlikely. So, this is a guy out of Shepherd. They don't even list his school here because it's not even a school anyone knows about. But yeah, so Tyson Bagent, that's the end of that.
No, what's interesting with the Saints is you think about it, when have they ever developed a quarterback? And I'm not even talking about obviously the Sean Payton reign, even before that kind of thing. Was it like a what's his name? He won the first playoff game for them. No, and he wasn't even drafted by the Saints. Oh, let me think.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank.
All right. You figure that out. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna share this. So here is my draft. You can't see Tyson Bagent at the bottom there, but he's there. Let's see. How do I'll have to zoom in and scroll. So Brian Brzee at 29. PFF gave me a B+. Jahmyr Gibbs at 40. Nathaniel Tank Dell at 71. Guard Andrew Voorhees at 115. Tight end Davis Allen at 115. Ola Segun Olawatimi at 165. The only A I got from PFF. Tyrus Wheat at 227. And then Tyson Bagent at 257. They don't even have a picture of the guy. They don't even know what his school is.
Tater Buddy had my back. Aaron Brooks, I couldn't come up with.
Oh, yeah, Aaron Brooks, right.
Duh.
Yeah. But yeah, so I like this draft. I don't hate it. I don't think it's accurate in terms of what's going to happen, but I do like the fact that I was able to address 3 positions that I think need depth in the first 3 picks. I was able to add 2 interior linemen that I feel like have some upside. I was able to get a tight end that I think profiles as a good developmental guy. And then I was able to get a couple, camp bodies in the 7th round. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, and then we've talked about it before. The fun of after the draft begins of all the undrafted free agent names.
Yes, it does.
I can imagine. Right. I might imagine the phone lines might be even crazier for that than during the draft.
It is entirely possible. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up there. This obviously went long as it always does. I do appreciate everyone who stuck around. Pelicans, Nola says, how many picks did you all hit on last year for the Saints? I don't think I did any 2nd or 3rd round mock drafts last year. I think I only did the 1st round. And I will say that I got both. I didn't get the trade, but I did get Chris Olave and Trevor Penning. I felt like that was kind of like, of all the years to get it right, that was a pretty, it's a low level flex to be able to be like, yeah, I got that, because it was kind of projected that that's what they wanted. Ohio State wide receiver, best offensive tackle on the board. So, I did get both of those last year, but I would be stunned. I don't even know if I could say I got any right this year, because I've made so many different picks. I think that's the Fletcher Mackel strategy of do so many mock drafts that you have so many ways to be like, oh, I called it. Just don't look at those other ones.
Right. And then all of a sudden pick number 29 comes and you hear the Saints select Hendon Hooker. And you're like, wait a minute, what?
Well, no, I think it was the Cesar Ruiz pick. So he had Cesar Ruiz. He was able to find a tweet where he had Cesar Ruiz as one of his picks. I do give him credit, because I could have done a million mock drafts and I wouldn't have had Cesar Ruiz. But at the same time, it was like one of 12 mocks he had done. It's like, yeah, you have a 1/3 chance if you get all of the 1st round picks. Anyway.
Yeah. And I think what we ended up doing 4 this year. That's usually my max.
Yeah. Well, that's why like I try, if I have a chance to pick the same guy and I haven't really changed my opinion on a guy, not necessarily going to change it. Like I took Tank Dell in 3 different mocks. So if they take Tank Dell, then I will claim that one as a victory, regardless of where they take him in the draft. If they take Isaiah Foskey, I will claim that as a victory because I had him in 2 of my mock drafts, and in this one just didn't work out. I probably would have still taken him. So yeah, the first round pick, I'm all over the board. It could be Brzee, it could be Torrance. I can't remember who else did I take. Kalijah Cansey, I traded up for him. If they trade up to 20 and take Kalijah, that's when I'll claim victory on that one.
Well, the good news is too, like I've talked to you about it, like the mock draft that I did that I hated, I ended up with Bijan at 29, and I don't think that's happening at all.
No, but I think when you did that, it kind of seemed a little crazy. But now that I think I've had some time to digest it, if he was on the board at 29, I think the Saints would have a really hard time passing on him.
Sure.
And it's really more like save them from themselves than anything else. But yeah, so that's it.
You know what? Maybe with the Bijan scenario, that might be something we finally see them trade down. Who knows?
To get a lesser player?
Yeah, right. Or maybe, get, who knows, to get those more assets, because you can get that running back later on, they might be thinking. So why not finally stock up on some picks and make everyone happy?
Yeah. Well, you could have got Marcus Davenport at 27. That's what people tell me. You could have got Cesar Ruiz in the 5th round or something,
Peyton Turner
in the 3rd round, right? So anyway, let's wrap that up. This has been going on for a while, but I do want to say, so Steve, you will be on the pre-draft show tomorrow? No.
No, the pre-draft show with Mike Haas and Deuce McAllister starts at 4:00, and yeah, that's a heck of a show that people definitely want to tune into, with all of the Saints front office and brass from, Mickey Loomis, Dennis Allen, the coaching staff. We've talked about it before. This is the first time we're going to hear from the defensive coordinator. Nobody has spoken with the Saints' new defensive coordinator yet.
It will be the first interview with him, so we'll get to learn a little bit. And then so Steve and I will be hosting the pre-draft show on Friday starting at 4, and then on Saturday starting at 9. And then we will have that one will be brutal. Don't judge me based on how mean I am in that one. And then we'll have
from Starbucks will be.
Yes. Then we'll have a wrap-up show on Sunday, which again will be the end of a grueling week. But I will be at the Saints facility for all 3 days. And I'll also be on the Odyssey draft show that Jason Lockenfora and Brian Baldinger are hosting on Odyssey, on the Odyssey app, and on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. I'll be on shortly after the Saints pick at 29. If they do trade up, then I will be on shortly after whatever pick that is. And I will be very much in shambles if that does happen, because they'll be scrambling. But it's, draft season is always kind of like a punch drunk kind of thing, because we talk about it for so long and then suddenly it's here. Like at least like training camp, the preseason, it's like a slow build up to the season and then we kind of go. Draft season, it's just, 0 to 100 in this week.
Yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned this one to you before, but I was not smart in the past and was like, all right, I'm going to take some time off before the draft. I came back like that Thursday for draft night.
Oh no.
And I wasn't ready to get back into the flow of things after being in downshifted for so long.
Yeah, I had a week off a couple weeks ago, as you know, and I at least had this kind of a week to reset. But like it took me a couple days to remember how to do my job and stuff.
It happens.
I'm not good at it, but I remember now.
No, especially when you're in that really deep. I mean, you had to obviously see a wedding in Vegas and to deal with, but yeah, vacation mode, to come back to the madness that's the NFL draft. It's a bit of a slap in the face.
Yeah. But then we'll get through it, and it's going to be like 2 months of nothing. So, we're complaining about it's like this grueling weekend, but then it's dead season. So we'll have a lot to talk about on these new draft picks. And I believe that there will be a rookie mini camp sometime in the next couple of weeks. So we'll get a chance to talk to a lot of these players. I'm looking forward to that. That's I think I've said before, that's one of my favorite things from the offseason, is just that one day where we get to see all of the rookies and talk to them for the first time in person. So keep an eye out for that too.
Yeah, it's easy. They've got their heads spinning, so they're more inclined to be receptive to talking to us.
Right. But all right. Thanks everyone for listening. This was our last mock draft episode, obviously, since the draft is tomorrow. So definitely don't listen to this after the draft and tell us how bad we were at picking the Saints draft selections. That would be terrible if you did that. Okay. And I know I put that warning at the end, meaning that if you had listened to it, that wouldn't actually help you. But as always, I appreciate everyone for listening. I appreciate everyone who rated and subscribed. And if you haven't done that, please do. If you're not subscribed to the YouTube page, please do that as well. It's been kind of a lull the last several weeks because I've been at a wedding, my own wedding, and then just not a ton of new content to throw at you. So it's been a little slow, but that will pick up draft night and going forward as we get more into this.
Yeah, definitely full bore ahead.
Yep. All right, y'all. Be easy. Peace.